All right, today we're jumping into something pretty intense based on a lot of detailed geopolitical analysis. We're going to explore a fictional but very plausible scenario, a full-blown war between the US, Israel, and Iran, kicking off in early 2026. We're going to break down how it all started, what the fighting actually looks like, and maybe most importantly, what the massive global fallout could be. So, it all kicks off with this. One single, absolutely explosive event. A coordinated strike to take out Iran's supreme leader. We talk about crossing red lines. This didn't just cross it, it completely obliterated it. And just like that, the Middle East is thrown into its biggest war in decades. Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the lead up to the war. Then, we'll get into the battlefronts, because they are spreading fast. After that, we'll dig into what the US and Israel are actually trying to achieve here. Then we'll turn inward, to the pressures building inside Iran. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the global ripple effects. Right, so first things first, how in the world did we get here? A conflict this big doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was more like a slow burn, Years of broken deals and rising tensions that finally caught fire. And this timeline, wow. It just lays it all out, doesn't it? You can literally trace the path from diplomacy completely falling apart to all-out devastation. When the US pulled out of the nuclear deal back in 2018, that really set the whole thing in motion. From there, it's just this steady, accelerating drumbeat towards war. You see the proxy attacks heat up, then bam, the first direct strikes between Israel and Iran, and then it's game on. So the assassination immediately creates this huge power vacuum. And who fills it? Khamenei's own son, Mojtaba. This kind of dynastic succession, especially in the middle of a war, was instantly shot down by Washington. So this isn't just a military fight anymore. Now, it's a direct challenge to the legitimacy of Iran's entire new leadership. Okay, now let's talk about how this thing just refused to stay in one place. It didn't take long for it to spill over borders, morphing into this incredibly complex, multi-front war that's basically pulled in the entire region. When you boil it down, the fighting itself is split into two very different approaches. On one side, you've got this super targeted, almost surgical air campaign from the US and Israel. They're trying to take apart Iran's military machine piece by piece. But Iran's response? It's the complete opposite. It's this widespread, asymmetric attack hitting everything, military bases, energy facilities, and even civilian areas all over the Middle East. And when you look at the US-Israeli strikes, they are incredibly precise. The intelligence points to them hitting these critical missile factories like Qusayr and Parshin. The whole point is to stop Iran from being able to build and fire its missiles. The strategy is super clear. Disarm them, but don't occupy the country. Iran's comeback, though, is all about spreading the pain and widening the conflict. They're firing missiles at Israeli cities, they're sending drones to hit key economic sites in the Gulf, they're attacking US troops stationed across the region, and they're telling their proxies like Hezbollah to open up another front. Their whole strategy is to make this war as costly as possible for absolutely everyone involved. So what does winning even look like in a situation like this? And this is where things get really interesting and frankly pretty dangerous. You've got the US and Israel fighting side by side, but they might be fighting for two completely different outcomes. So, from what the analysis shows, the US is going for something called the Venezuela model. The idea isn't to cause a total collapse of the country. Nope, it's more like a leadership swap. Take out the hardliners at the top, find someone more reasonable on the inside to work with, and, this is key, keep the country's structure running so you can secure all that oil. Israel, on the other hand, seems to be sticking to its classic mowing the grass strategy. Think of it as a war of attrition. The goal is to just constantly weaken Iran's military and its economy over a very long time. It's not about a quick victory. It's about managing the threat by inflicting slow, steady, and maximum damage. And this chart right here, this really nails the core problem. You've got the US, which wants a clear outcome, a new, friendlier government in Iran. But Israel's strategy actually benefits from dragging this thing out to make sure Iran stays weak for years to come. I mean, it's pretty obvious those two endgames just do not line up. Okay, let's shift gears and look at what's happening inside Iran. Because while the regime is trying to look strong to the outside world, it is dealing with a massive crisis of survival at home. Now, this is just a bombshell piece of analysis, supposedly coming from inside the Iranian government itself. Iran's own president is reportedly warning that the hardline IRGC is literally driving the country off an economic cliff. We're talking a total collapse. This shows a massive split between the political leaders and the military guys over what this war is actually costing them. So, to handle all this, the regime is basically walking a tightrope. On one hand, they're cracking down hard on any disagreement. On the other, they're desperately trying to rally people with nationalism. This whole John Fada campaign is their attempt to create a new volunteer force, both to crush internal threats and to prepare for a potential ground invasion. But here's the crucial takeaway. Even with all this insane pressure, most experts don't think the Iranian regime is just going to crumble and disappear. What's seen as much more likely is that the IRGC just takes over completely, and Iran transforms into a full-on military state. And finally, let's pull the camera all the way back. Because this is not just a regional war anymore. The shockwaves are hitting the entire planet, shaking up economies and redrawing the geopolitical map. 20%. Just think about that number. That's how much of the world's entire oil supply squeezes through the Strait of Hormuz. And by shutting that down, Iran has basically just slammed the brakes on the global energy market. And you can see the result right here, clear as day. The price of oil just skyrocketed from $85 a barrel to over $114. It was such a massive shock that the International Energy Agency had to do something unprecedented, release 400 million barrels from emergency reserves just to try and calm things down. But this goes so far beyond the price of gas. We're talking about a huge humanitarian disaster, with millions of people forced from their homes. Diplomatically, the US and Israel are kind of on their own, with their big European allies wanting no part of the fighting. And those rich Gulf states, always seen as these super safe places to do business, well, now they're on the front line, with Iranian drones and missiles headed their way. Which brings us to the final, really unsettling question. What our sources show is a war where the main players want different things, where the violence keeps escalating, and where the consequences are global. Without a single unified goal, the analysis isn't pointing toward peace. It's pointing toward the grim possibility of a war that just keeps getting wider and wider.